how do you describe him in one word?
Salesman. He's a once-in-a-generation fundraising talent. An ability beyond anyone to convince a room full of people that he can see the future and that they should invest in that future. When I first met him, there was this moment when he was standing on this sort of staircase in the very center of OpenAI's headquarters. The staircase reminded me of some kind of a temple. He seemed like someone who understood companies as religious phenomena. He is here to sell belief. There is no limit to what humans can do in basically conquering every inch of the universe and definitely curing death in this man's vision.
クロスディグ101始まります。今日のテーマは OpenAI サム・アルトマンの野望です。AI データセンターや半導体チップに巨額の投資を続ける OpenAI、 その規模は200兆円に上ると言われています。でそんな巨額マネーの中心にいるのがサム・アルトマン CEO です。でこのアルトマン氏についての本が最近発売されました。こちらです。その名もサム・アルトマン生成 AI で世界を手にした起業家の野望です。今日は著者であるウォール・ストリート・ジャーナル記者のキーチ・ヘイギーさんに話を聞きます。ぜひ最後までご覧ください。Okay, we have a special guest today joining us here from New York. It's Keach Hagey, a reporter from the Wall Street Journal. So, Keach, thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So everyone has been talking about OpenAI and some Altman, even in Japan. So OpenAI seems to be like the center of everything of what's going on in the AI industry, whether that's cutting-edge models, like products, investments, or infrastructures. So there must be tons of things to cover for you every single day. So, but how did you get into the reporting of OpenAI and Sam Altman in the first place?
Well, yeah, it's a funny story because, I am traditionally a media reporter that's been covering tech for, a few years. Mm-hmm. But I ended up just being assigned to write a profile of Sam right after ChatGPT was announced. ChatGPT comes out in November 2022. The entire world is amazed. Even our editors of the Wall Street Journal realized, this is going to change everything. So we had a meeting a couple months after about we need to deeply understand this. And I ended up flying out to San Francisco and meeting with him at the headquarters of OpenAI. And we wrote, one of the first big profiles of Sam, just trying to explain who he was, from childhood, and how he became sort of the leader of the AI race. And after that profile ran, a book publisher reached out to me and asked if I wanted to write a book about it. Mm-hmm. And it seemed kind of crazy to write a book about someone who was then 38 years old, but I think it turned out to be a good bet.
Yeah, the biography is usually for people who already passed away, or even when they're alive, it's over 50 or 60 or something like that, right?
Yeah, and even Sam himself thought this was the case when we brought the idea to him, about writing a biography. He didn't like the idea, and one of his reasons was it's much too soon, right? Which is fair. He thinks he's going to accomplish many more things besides what's happened so far. He has ambitions in nuclear energy and in longevity, not just AI. So he wanted us to wait, if nothing else, but. I think it's important to have this information now because, as you said, OpenAI sits at the very forefront of this race that is remaking not just the work life of the entire globe, but also the infrastructure. And so I think we need to understand sooner rather than later who he really is.
Mm-hmm. So even after you wrote a profile of Sam Altman, you wanted to pursue the reporting. You want to keep writing about him. So what part of Altman made you more interested?
It's true. Usually after you write a profile, you're done, right? You don't want to think about that person anymore. And so Sam was really different in that I felt that I was more curious, not less curious. And a couple things really stood out during that interview that we did with him for the profile. One was that he didn't own any equity in OpenAI, which was insane. Like even at the time, like we asked the question. I remember asking it. Well, what if I asked the question this way? What if I asked the question this way? And it ended up that he does own a tiny bit through some fund, but basically it's proved to be the case, right? That it is a nonprofit. You can't really own a share in a nonprofit. So he did not own equity, and that was just like no one could believe it, right? How is it possible that you would create a company and not own part of it? And I thought that was such a mystery that it required more investigation. I think it speaks to Sam's confidence that he's able to wield power not just through brute force, right? He's able to wield power through the people that he knows, through the people he's done favors for, through deals that he's made. And we've watched him do that. That's how he got himself unfired when he was fired. So this really special skill of his was just kind of fascinating to me, and I really wanted to understand it more. The other thing is that when I first met him, there was this moment when he was standing on this sort of staircase in the very center of OpenAI's headquarters, and he had designed it, and he was very proud of it. And I remember the staircase reminded me of some kind of a temple. Like the whole experience seemed vaguely religious, and he seemed like someone who understood companies as religious phenomena, right? That he is here to sell belief. And in this case, it was belief in AGI, artificial general intelligence, and this like remarkable ability to sell what is essentially like a commercial product or a company as a religious experience, I found fascinating, and I wanted to know more.
So about this book, before I started reading, I thought this book was going to be only focusing on Altman's life and career and such a thing, but I found out this was almost like the history of Silicon Valley and startups, like after, the breakout of the dot-com bubble, So a sort of the resurgence of startups kind of time era. So what did you ultimately want to write about in this book?
I really wanted to write about power, how power works, how power really works in Silicon Valley, and I wanted to, every time there was a deal, I wanted to understand, okay, well, really, why did this deal happen, right? Yes, there's a commercial reason, but there's almost always also a personal reason. People know each other for a reason. And it's these personal relationships that are how Silicon Valley is powered. And what I found was that there's a very small number of people, like a tiny club of people who really control the heart of Silicon Valley. It's a few venture capital firms like Sequoia Capital, and what really happened during Sam's career is Y Combinator, this startup accelerator that he was in the very first class of starting in 2005. That became sort of like the new center of power in Silicon Valley. And because he was in from the very beginning and he eventually became the president of it, he was absolutely close to the beating heart. Peter Thiel calls him sort of the absolute essence of the Silicon Valley zeitgeist. And as I watched how his first startup rose and then fell and was given a soft landing because Sequoia was one of their backers, and the way that founders were treated as they passed from one startup to the next, I felt like I really started to understand how and why Sam is powerful and how power really works in Silicon Valley.
Right. When you try to write about the power, it became like... You mean that you wanted to write about the change of the power in the course of history? That explains well about how important Sam Altman is.
It's partly that, but I also just wanted to understand like the mechanism of it. When I signed the deal to write the book, and at that point it was a book about like, this amazing new technology, ChatGPT, and then a few months, maybe 6-7 months into writing the book, Sam got fired. Right? Which was a crazy experience. And then I watched him get unfired, which I'd never ever seen a CEO unfire himself before. And so one of the big questions was, like, how does a person become the kind of person who can unfire themselves, right? Who has this power, who can call in personal favors, who understands how things work in this way, without any power on paper, right? But who can just, wield relationships with people in this way. So it was that kind of power that I was interested in. But you're right that there's also this huge sea change that happened during Sam's lifetime where the dot-com bubble traumatized a whole generation of startups and entrepreneurs and made them afraid of having a business model that didn't have revenue and things like this. And Sam is really the very beginning of the new generation that was no longer quite so afraid. And that's what we saw, the whole rise of the boom that is in many ways still going on, right, from 2005 to this day, right? It's all pretty much gone up, aside from like the financial crisis and things like that.
I want to dig deeper on who Sam Altman really is. So how do you describe him in one word?
Salesman.
Salesman?
Yeah, he's a fundraiser. I mean, I really think he's a once in a generation fundraising talent. He has an ability beyond anyone to convince a room full of people that he can see the future and that they should invest in that future. And then the future becomes real because he then has that investment to do it. But the initial moment is really in being so convincing and visionary during the pitch or the meeting that the people are willing to put money behind him. So he's a salesman.
Is he sort of the natural fundraiser salesman? Like you also talk to his parents, his families, his old friends and teachers, 250 people, as he wrote. So how did he become such a person?
So, when Sam was young, he was always sort of, his mom would say that she would say that she felt like she could drop him in New York City at the age of 10 and he could figure out how it works. Like he just understood systems. He was very smart in kind of like a worldly wise way, right? Like an old soul kind of thing. He knew how things worked at a much younger age than he should have. But he did have real scientific curiosity. He studied computer science at Stanford, and he was always reading kind of about various science things, but in a broad way. But the thing that one of the teachers that was close to him in high school said is that he wasn't just like a nerd who only cared about tech. He also cared about literature. He also cared about politics, and he could weave these things together. And when Sam told this teacher that he was going to go into tech, the teacher was like, "Oh, Sam, don't go into tech. You're so personable, right? Like you have you're so charismatic. You have the wrong personality for that. Like it's a waste, in this teacher's idea." And I do think Sam is unique in many ways among tech leaders in that he does have that sort of full set of skills, right? The liberal arts and sort of the technical that he brings to bear to people. So he can connect with a person across a table in a conversation on some small bit of commonality that makes you convinced that you have like a special connection with him. So it might be that you love, actually Japan is one of the things he loved. I remember he and Robert Thompson, our CEO, right? They have said publicly in an interview, they connected over their shared love of Japan. It could be about ham radios, anything. He has this ability to connect because he has a very broad set of things that he's interested in and knows kind of a weird amount about. So that's sort of the base of his like his sales ability, right? Is he can connect with people because he has that sort of many-colored intelligence.
Yeah. So why did you title this book The Optimist?
So I think that The Optimist is how Sam presents himself. That is sort of my commentary on how the persona he has crafted to present to the world. If you go back and read his blog post when he was leading Y Combinator, there'll always be this sort of deep optimism about not just about like what the technology sector can do, but also just about like what America is and what we all can do as people. And that's very typical, right, of Silicon Valley, that he is a techno-optimist. He would describe himself even that way, that we are all, in his view, like we're all on this journey of progress that begins with early man, our tool-making ability, and has marched steadily forward, curing diseases and making life better for people. And we are just on this sort of like inevitable journey of improvement and progress. And one of his favorite books is this book called The Beginning of Infinity by David Deutsch. He actually recently did an event with, who's this physicist who wrote, the book is amazing in that it describes a future where humanity is going to conquer all of space. We're going to conquer all dark matter and turn it into knowledge. Like there is no limit to what humans can do in basically conquering every inch of the universe and definitely curing death in this man's vision. So that is sort of like the level of optimism that Sam has. I also feel like the title has another side to it though, right? In that there are a lot of people who are very afraid of artificial intelligence, especially artificial general intelligence. And while OpenAI is definitely founded with those fears in mind, it's pretty clear that like Sam is not a doomer. And I think his critics would say that he is too optimistic about the prospects of AI and especially about our ability to align it and make sure that it doesn't rise up and kill us.
Right. So you said he's very good at convincing people and fundraising sort of things. But what do you think he's bad at?
So I think Sam would be the first to say that management is not his strong suit, I would say. So over the course of his career, and there's a lot of this in the book, right? He has had some real challenges as a manager. In his first startup, there was a time where a lot of the senior folks kind of came to the board and just asked the board to please replace him as CEO. He was chasing too many shiny objects, and they were not convinced that they were going to have a decent exit. You know, he was going to be swinging for like the $1 billion exit, not the smaller exit, and they were all going to be left behind. And so we've seen a couple times, both at Y Combinator, he sort of left on not great terms there because he got distracted and he broke trust with the founders there. And then, of course, he got fired at OpenAI. And one of the reasons for his firing, as the book said, was that he would basically tell two people yes for the same job, that kind of thing. Right? He wants to say, he kind of wants to tell people what they want to hear in a meeting and not make difficult choices sometimes. And that led to major clashes that were so big that it was a huge part of his firing. So management is a challenge for him. I also think that it's taken him a while to get a good handle on product. I don't think he's necessarily a product visionary, but he is very good at finding people who are. So a lot of the success of ChatGPT, right? They hired Fiji Simo from of Facebook fame to come and like really work on product for them. But in his first startup, you could see the product kind of pivot around a lot and sort of splash around because he had a core understanding that the underlying technology, which in this case was like location-enabled phones, was going to be very important, a little bit like AI, right? But exactly what they're going to do with it, less clear.
Right. I think that's probably come from a broad curiosity of him. Obviously, he's not only involved in OpenAI, but also retro biosciences, Workcoin, or helium energy, like so longevity, nuclear energy, and also things. So what does he ultimately want to do? What drives him to do things?
Yes, one of the things that I was really curious about is there a unified theory of Sam Altman, right? Because all of those startups that you mentioned, they sort of interlock in this fascinating way. And he has written essays where it does seem like it all fits into one big picture, right? That AI is going to be amazing and it's going to be an extension of our wills, but it requires a lot of energy. So I know I'll solve that problem by investing in nuclear fusion and other nuclear energy entities that will give us the clean energy that we need to power this AI revolution. Like for many years, when people asked him and even now still, if people ask him the question, that sort of one of the sort of gotcha questions of AI is like, okay, but what about the energy, right? And this is his solution. So he will invest his way to the solution to that. He will invest his way to longevity, or even in the social sciences. Okay, one of the other problems with AI is it might take away all our jobs. So, okay, let's solve that by investing in studies on universal basic income and see if we can kind of present evidence that would convince government that this might be a good solution. Another problem with AI is that it's going to make it unclear who's a human and who's not. And so he invested in WorldCoin, this crypto eyeball scanning thing, right? That has many purposes, but among them is to sort of determine who's human and who's not out in the world, and might also be a mechanism for some global UBI distribution in the future. So they all kind of fit together as one big puzzle. And I think it goes back to his vision of like what we are here on Earth to do. He has this room in his house where he has objects of kind of that show mankind's major steps forward, right? So like an ancient hand axe, an Apple computer, the robot hand from OpenAI. I think maybe there's some parts of like a Concorde plane. And to me, this is like his religion, right? It is that humans are tool-making creatures. This is what we're here to do. There's no reason we should like slow ourselves down in doing that. And that our destiny is to live forever and have machines do much of our work for us.
I remember you wrote that he got accepted to Stanford. The thing he wants to do is AI and nuclear energy and other things. So it was like a consistent vision for him.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, even when he was in maybe middle school, elementary school, he had this vision sitting in his childhood bedroom with his like Apple computer that, oh my gosh, one day this computer is gonna learn how to think. Which, maybe that occurs to every kid who reads a bunch of sci-fi, but you're right that AI as sort of the ultimate goal, the most interesting problem you could work on has been in his life the whole time. When he was at Stanford, he studied at the lab run by Andrew Ng, who then, he became a major figure in AI. And back then they were just doing stuff like autonomous helicopter, systems and things like that. It wasn't at all clear that there would be some general function. But I think he's always considered it the most interesting problem a person could be working on.
How would you describe the characteristics of the Sam Altman as an entrepreneur compared to Steve Jobs and Bill Gates?
Well, I mean, the thing that really drives Sam Altman is a love of risk. He played poker in college pretty consistently, and he loves race cars, and he has a very high tolerance for risk. And the thing that really makes him different than those other two figures who you're talking about is that Sam is, at his core, an investor. It's something that he learned about himself that he almost didn't like about himself initially. Like after he did his first startup, he thought, okay, maybe I'm going to start another company, be a CEO again. But he started, investing for a while in the interim, and he kind of learned about himself, like, oh God, I'm actually like a natural investor. Like this is what I should be doing, and that's kind of what Y Combinator is. Like, yes, it's an accelerator that sort of teaches startups how to be startups, but it's really like a venture fund that takes a stake in them and then uses their network to coach them into, success. And that's where he really thrived, giving advice to startups, investing in startups, using his network to help them. And that is just not really something that like Steve Jobs was doing, right? Steve Jobs was like focused on like the Mac, the machine, the user experience. And Sam just like is more focused on sort of the financial scene and in the market and the pool of talent out there, which he sort of puppeteered as the leader of Y Combinator.
So about the firing, ouster of Sam Altman from OpenAI in 2023, I also was a tech reporter in Japan, so I was glued to the screen of X in the whole weekend, as you probably did on that weekend. So I believe you went through the same kind of situation. So what went through your mind when you first saw it?
Oh my gosh, I love that we share the trauma or whatever that was of that. So I honestly, I was I was taking my daughter's Girl Scout troop for a hike in the woods, and I look down at my phone and I see this headline: Sam Altman has been fired from OpenAI by the board. And I just remember like the ground kind of dropping away beneath my feet because, I'm like, am I dreaming? Like, how is this possible? There were no hints beforehand, right? It was not, usually when a CEO gets fired, you hear rumors, you hear there's problems. This was nothing like that, right? This was completely out of the blue, like completely unexpected. I couldn't really believe what had happened. So I remember like scrambling around for a pencil and just trying to call people all that night, trying to understand what had happened. And, within a few hours, we were hearing from like sources who understood Sam's side of things that, okay, this was a coup by Ilya Sutskever, who is a chief scientist, or this was Helen Toner, one of the board members, who was mad because Sam had tried to fire her. Both of which were like a little bit true, not the whole truth, but those narratives were already out within hours of his firing, and that weekend was insane, right? Nobody slept. I didn't sleep. You probably didn't sleep. Nobody who was involved in it slept at all, which is, I think, what led to the insanity. Right after about 3 days of not sleeping, like people get pretty crazy. That's when the crying started, as we reported.
Yeah.
Yes, it was just like nothing I had ever experienced in my entire career as a business reporter.
That happened after you started the covering OpenAI, Sam Altman, and started the book projects, right? So I bet you already talked to many people around Sam Altman. So did you hear anything about him that, like, he's constant lying to people around him, or like saying yes to two people, as you said?
So, I had heard those complaints from people at his first startup. So, at that point in the book process, I had been reporting a lot about his first startup, Looped. And some of those themes definitely came up in my reporting about Looped, that, Sam had the reality distortion field of Steve Jobs. If you do want to compare them how they're similar, that is one way, right? They both have a reality distortion field, which ends up being like an almost necessary thing in Silicon Valley, right? If you're going to create something new. But it has downsides for the people around you sometimes. So people from his first startup, really thought that, Sam was a visionary, but sometimes said things that weren't true and, stretched the truth. And there were a number of them that had lost trust in him for some of this stuff. So I was aware of the pattern, but I'll be honest that I did not hear it from OpenAI until after the firing, and then I went back and sort of talked to all the people sort of in this world and understood better the sort of many factors that came to contribute to his firing.
Yeah. I read your book about that happening, about what was going on in OpenAI, and it seems like the board could have done better to improve the situation back then. There must be a different option from firing Sam Altman.
Yeah, it depends. They definitely could have done a better job. For sure, they could have done a better job communicating what was going on, right? Yeah. I think the real problem for the board's perspective is they got some legal advice that said that they could not say why they were firing him. So they just put out this very vague statement that was like basically for lying to the board, is what they said. But like, you can't, in today's media environment, you can't just say that and then not say what he lied to the board about, right? Like it just means that no one can like weigh whether this was a legitimate action. And everyone's just gonna have to take the board's, take the board's word for it, which they could not withstand the pressure of that vagueness. It didn't work. It's an interesting question that you raised, though. Was there some other way of solving this problem besides firing him? I will say that, one of the more interesting things to me when I was doing research in the book is the role that Mira Murati played. She's the CTO, and she had actually talked to many members of the board about Sam's management failings leading up to his firing. And the board definitely took what she told them very seriously as for their reasons to fire him. I don't think that Mira necessarily thought that that was going to be their outcome, right? She's not on the board. She didn't know that they were going to take this information and choose to fire him, not only because of it, but like in part. And so I think in her view, maybe they were going to like send him to management training, you know, or some other solution, right? Or put additional controls or something like that. So I think she was a little surprised that the board decided to fire Sam. Even though, again, when Ilya Sutskever presented to the board this sort of like dossier on things that Sam did wrong in like a disappearing PDF format, because they were all so paranoid, it consisted of a lot of screenshots from Mira's Slack, right, about things that Sam had told two people different things, or Sam had tried to go around a safety thing here, or just cause chaos in these other ways. So yes, I think there are some folks involved here who thought there could have been some option other than firing. The issue, though, is that the board is a nonprofit board, and their goal, they don't care about, you know, the money. Their goal is this safe? Is this for the benefit of humanity? And if the people on the board lost trust in Sam as sort of just as a person who should be in charge of AGI fundamentally, which is what happened, then according to the charter, they actually kind of had no choice but to fire him.
Right. Do you think that OpenAI needed adult supervision like Eric Schmidt for early Google or Sheryl Sandberg for early Facebook? What do you think?
Yeah, so I remember that theory was going around a lot in the course of the firing, right? Because it's true that like OpenAI had a lot of people on its executive team that were not super old, right? I mean, a lot of those people are executives that, I don't want to say that Sam has grown them, but like who worked with Sam at Y Combinator. A couple of key people have come up through Y Combinator. But back then, anywhere, there were not people of like, many people of an older generation, right? Like people were in their 30s, pretty much, not older than that. You'll note that since then, a lot of older people have entered the company, right? Like one of the solutions to Sam's firing was to get Larry Summers on the board, who you know was like former Treasury Secretary, who is of like a completely older generation, and the board has since gotten a lot more experienced, kind of typical board members on there. So that was in one of the things I say in the book is that Sam really loved to show how weird he was before the blip, and then after the blip, he tried to sort of put away all the weirdness, right? Become as normal and vanilla as possible. And one of the ways he did that was by recruiting a lot more senior people, both to the board and to the senior management of the company.
But many executives and employees at OpenAI have been struggling with Sam, but he eventually went back to the company. He went back to the CEO. He's been a CEO since then, even right now. So why do you think he was able to get back despite like frustration with him? Why is he still working as a CEO of OpenAI?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. I think a really important one to mention is the tender offer that was happening during this time. So just like stepping back a little bit, right? It used to be that in Silicon Valley, if you joined a hot tech company, you would have to wait for the IPO to get rich. In this new world of unicorns or people don't IPO for a very, very long time, there are these secondary market tender offers, right? Where employees basically can sell their shares to like other investors and get liquidity pretty early on. So one of these, there's usually at least one a year at OpenAI, and one of these was going on during the time of the firing. So what that consists of is Sam going to his friends at Thrive Capital and getting them to sort of buy shares from employees. And it was very clear that that tender offer was going to be on ice if Sam was fired. So all these employees who thought that they were going to get, millions of dollars and be able to buy second houses, all of a sudden, if Sam's out the door, like that is no longer going to happen.
Yeah.
So that's one really big factor. It's not the only factor, but it's a big one. So the other one is that, Sam has this incredible network of people from Y Combinator and just from the broader tech world who are very loyal to him. And one of the key ones was Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb, who was another person who was a Sequoia person like Sam, was a Y Combinator person like Sam. And within minutes and hours, Brian Chesky's on the phone trying to figure out, like, okay, Sam, did you murder anyone? If not, okay, this is ridiculous. Let's fight it, right? So as soon as he found out that Sam had not murdered anyone, he kind of takes to Twitter and starts saying, this is nonsense. This firing is nonsense. I support Sam. A couple other folks said that. I think Eric Schmidt said something like that night before anyone knew anything, right? Like, no facts are in at all. But Sam has very powerful people who will publicly vouch for him in the court of public opinion just before anyone knows anything. So that ended up being actually very important, just to like swing the narrative away from the board. And then another part of it is that, like, this religion thing, right? Sam really did have the loyalty of a lot of those employees. And we saw that when almost all of nearly 800 of them signed this letter saying they would all leave and go to Microsoft unless Sam were reinstated. So you can look at that and say, oh, this is partly the tender offer, and maybe it was, but I think there's real loyalty of the employees as well, who frankly saw that the company was very possibly going to completely fall apart without him.
But a lot of executives have left, like even before the firing and after the firing, like Ilya Sutskever and Miriam Brady left and founded the company. And before the firing, Dario Amodei left and founded Anthropic. So they all founded basically rival companies. Do you think they are going to be real competitors to OpenAI?
I think Anthropic is a real competitor to OpenAI now. I mean, sure, OpenAI is far ahead in many ways, but we've seen, Claude is well loved and used, especially for coding. People in OpenAI use Claude for coding. So they have built a competitive product that I think Anthropic is a real competitor, both sort of in the policy space as well as product. Ilya and Mira's companies are still very young, so we'll see. We don't know, but they have managed to raise quite a lot of capital.
Right. So about those fundraising, the whole tech industry is spinning around OpenAI. Like every time they announce their investment in OpenAI, their stock price went up, like NVIDIA, AMD, or SoftBank Group in Japan. As we look forward, there will be tons of money to be invested into the AI industry. So do you think Altman is showing more fundraising talent right now?
Oh, yeah. I mean, every single day, you look at the newspaper and it's another chip company or, another, whatever, like another cloud company who's doing a deal. And, many people have also pointed out that it seems kind of like the money's going in a circle, which is a little bit how the Microsoft deal with OpenAI was itself, right? That like they're just like OpenAI, the investment that OpenAI got from Microsoft, it's just using to like pay for server space on Microsoft's servers, right? So it's just like a circle. Yet a very beneficial one. Like that was a very good partnership for a while for both sides, even if it's kind of now being superseded by these other deals. So yeah, I mean, this is Sam's absolute forte, right? He's flying around the world, signing deals, giving one rival FOMO against the other rival, sort of playing people against each other a little bit, and all to the point of pushing up OpenAI's valuation, and frankly, the valuation of any company that is driven by AI at this moment.
But people point out about the risk of investing in such a closed loop of the companies. I think there's some Altman that recognizes the risk of those things, but is he going to make it still?
Isn't that the $7 trillion question?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as long as Sam can convince the next person that he can see the future, he'll be okay.
You mean successor? successor? Of
I know. I mean, like sort of the next investor. The next investor, right? As long as there's like as long as there's always like another investor, another partner around the corner, as long as the machine doesn't stop, I feel like Sam's track record of getting investment is pretty strong. That said, it's important that we all note that, OpenAI is losing a lot of money. And the actual profitability of AI is just a big question mark, right? We don't really know where that point is. But I will say one of his like key theses is that if we do all this huge infrastructure build out, it will drive down the cost of compute enough that AI can become a good that people can use all the time without thinking too much about it. And we have seen that begin to happen, right? We've seen like the cost of compute is like wildly coming down. Moore's law is happening in the AI field. So far, that general bet seems like it's going in the right direction. I think it's really, really unclear whether the amount of investment that is put in will end up all shaking out without a lot of pain. I'm sure there will be a moment where there's pain. But as long as Sam can convince, the next investor to come in behind the ones that are here now, he'll be okay.
Yeah, I think he'll be good at convincing the next investor. But as you said, the management is a shortcoming of him. But so as the company or the ecosystem gets bigger, how do you think he manages all of that?
I mean, if you look at the precedents here, look at what happened at, for example, Y Combinator. He was the president of Y Combinator, and then he sort of started a lot of different like subsections of it. He started a fund, and he started a nonprofit, which OpenAI grew out of, and all these kind of new initiatives. And then he named himself like the global president of the group, tried to give himself like a distance from the day-to-day somewhat. And you've already seen that happen a little bit at OpenAI, right? He has been hiring major management talent around him so that you see him more focused on fundraising and infrastructure, right? And less maybe on the day-to-day stuff. Although he's also been very focused on, product with the Johnny Ive stuff. So he's not to that point yet, but my guess would be one day in the future, you'll see him do one of those step backs once the thing really gets huge. The other important thing though is the market is expecting that they will IPO.
Right.
And from talking to investors, like maybe sooner rather than later. So I think that the market would probably want him to sort of be at the helm, through that whole process. But on the other side of it, who knows?
What do you think about the relationship between Sam Altman and Masayoshi Son, SoftBank Group CEO? You didn't write much about that in the book, right?
Well, it hadn't really happened yet.
Oh, okay,
so the book kind of closes at the end of 2024, and it was like 3 weeks after that, I guess, that Sam and Masa stood and had their White House moment with Trump and announced the $500 billion Stargate thing. No, Sam and Masa had been talking. We had reported for more than a year, about a year at least at that point. And Sam had been trying to do what is happening now, right? But he'd made an earlier attempt at it, flying around the world, trying to get people from the Middle East to give him money to do a giant infrastructure build out for data centers. And I remember we had a story where people said, this globally, this whole thing over the next 10 years, including energy and data centers and chip fabs and all that stuff, is going to be like $5 to $7 trillion. And people just laughed, like that's such a ridiculous number. That's like bigger than the GDP of many countries. What are you talking about? But I'm just gonna place that there because like we are heading for something that might not be that different than that.
But your book is about sort of a story of people obsessed with AGI, artificial general intelligence. But we don't hear much about AGI from OpenAI these days. They more focus on products like Sora and everything. So what do you think? What direction do you think OpenAI is going right now?
It's a really good observation, and it's right that he talks a lot less about AGI now. There was like that blog post that like the takeoff has already sort of happened. Like we're already kind of in this very slow frog boiling in a pot moment where like AGI is creeping up on us and we might not even recognize it when it happens, kind of thing. I think part of the issue is there were agreements structured with their deal with Microsoft that, before AGI, Microsoft gets to share it and the profits. After AGI, Microsoft doesn't get to share. So it was like this line that was both fictional, I think, and making things very difficult. So I think that's part of the reason why you don't hear him talk about it so much anymore. And the other thing is they don't make money. And so they really, really need a strong product solution to get in the black. I mean, it's as simple as that. That's why they hired Fiji Simo. That's why we're hearing, they're already doing e-commerce options. I'm sure that they will be doing advertising before it's all over. And the Sora thing was really interesting, right? Because you saw the reaction here, I don't know what it was like in Japan, was, wait, we thought you were doing AGI and curing cancer. Like, what is this? Right? Maybe that's just sort of my little bubble. It was also, quite remarkable. And I think people in Hollywood are excited about what it can do, although they're not thrilled about the copyright aspect. But it is kind of jarring, the shift, right? From we are going to make AGI to we are going to make this cool video generator.
But Altman posts on X that they need to make money. That's why they launched Sora.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. But look, their investors have been very patient, but investors need a return someday, right? I mean, that is what Sam is very good at also, is he is keenly aware of, especially in this talent war, he's keenly aware of what talent needs, right? Like, we need to structure our stock in a certain way. They want to do this conversion partly because the stock needs to be structured in a way so that they can give stock grants to employees to be able to get the best talent. So he's very aware of like what talent needs. He's very aware of what investors need, which is returns, right? Eventually. So, like as much as it was a good story to tell the researchers when they were trying to get the company off the ground, and even still, that we are working on AGI. I mean, that is still very much the idea of the company. I want to be clear about that, right? During this talent war that they were having with Meta all summer, the pitch at OpenAI was, if you say OpenAI, we are going to be the ones that reach AGI first. So that is still their pitch to the sort of talent research community. But as they are becoming basically a consumer products company, their pitch to the wider world, you're right, is quite different and is less about AGI.
Okay. Yeah, I really appreciate your deep insight into OpenAI and Sam Altman. And lastly, are you going to cover OpenAI and Sam Altman for a while, many more years? What are your plans?
Well, I am covering it now. Yes, I mean, I am going to keep covering it for now, because it's a crazy story. It's like the craziest business story of all time, right? Both the business story and the broader like social and political story around it is just fascinating. So I'm in for the foreseeable future.
I will be excited to read that as a fellow reporter.
Thank you.
So we had Keach Hagey, a reporter from the Wall Street Journal. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.